Never raise kids in luxury if you don't want to raise strangers in your own house. This is the kind of story that starts with gold walls and ends with empty hands, and the lesson in between might change how you see money, family, and success forever. Matthew Adams was one of the most powerful and respected men in the entire city. People spoke his name with pride. Some said his wisdom built half of the businesses in the country. Others said his kindness fed thousands of families. He owned hotels, tech companies, real estate, and a logistics company that crossed borders. When Matthew walked into a room, people stood up without being asked, but inside his beautiful mansion, hidden behind golden walls and expensive furniture, Matthew carried a heavy sadness. That sadness had names: Natasha and Susan. His two daughters. Natasha was 25. Tall, beautiful, always dressed like she stepped out of a magazine. Her life revolved around cameras, likes, comments, and luxury brands. Susan was 23, softer, quieter, but she followed her sister like a shadow. If Natasha moved, Susan followed. If Natasha laughed, Susan laughed. If Natasha said work was stressful, Susan agreed. They both graduated from top universities, but barely passed. Their days were spent in malls, resorts, cafes, and parties. Matthew never complained. He believed love and patience would fix everything. His wife Helen made things worse without knowing it. She believed suffering was a curse and comfort was a right. She never let the girls cook, clean, or struggle. "My husband is rich," she would say. "My daughters will never suffer." Matthew stayed quiet for years. He hoped time would mature them. Instead, comfort spoiled them. One afternoon, after a long meeting, Matthew came home tired. He found his daughters lying on the couch, laughing at their phones, shopping bags everywhere, food plates left untouched. The TV was loud and Natasha. "Susan, can we talk?" "Dad, can it wait?" Natasha said. "There's a sale." Susan nodded. "We're busy." Something cracked inside him. "Stand up." His voice was calm, but sharp. They obeyed. Helen walked in smiling. "What's wrong, dear?" "The problem isn't work," Matthew said. "The problem is this house." He looked at his daughters. "Are you proud of the life you're living?" They exchanged looks. "Yes," Natasha said. "It's comfortable." "And work?" Matthew asked. Natasha laughed. "Why should we work?" "You're rich." Susan added softly, "When you die, we inherit everything." That sentence hit him like ice water. "I plan to give you my companies," Matthew said. "But you prepared for nothing." Natasha shrugged. "You raised us this way." Susan smiled. "We're not built for stress." That night, Matthew didn't sleep. He remembered being poor, hungry, alone. He worked so his children wouldn't suffer, and now they couldn't survive without money. The next morning, his secretary rushed in. For checks. Forged. $340,000 gone. Hermes Birkin bags. Matthew drove home immediately. He found the girl celebrating the bags like trophies. "You forged my signature," he said quietly. Natasha smiled. "It's just money." Susan added, "You can replace it." "This is fraud," Matthew said. "You could go to prison." Helen walked in and waved it off. "Stop stressing them. You're rich." That was the moment Matthew realized the truth. To them, he wasn't a father. He was a wallet. The next morning, Matthew shouted through the house, "I lost everything." Helen laughed. "Nice joke." But the calls confirmed it. Fires. Seized factories. Investors gone. Everything collapsed. Panic filled the house. Not fear for Matthew. Fear for money. "What will we do?" Helen cried. "We can't be poor." Matthew looked at her and said softly, "That's the problem. You never believed I could fall." 2 days later, Matthew packed his bags. "We're going to the village," he said. Helen screamed. The girls cried. The word village sounded worse than prison. "I'm leaving," Matthew said. "Come if you want." He left. Natasha and Susan refused to follow him. They ran to their boyfriends, both doors closed. One was married. The other didn't want a broke girl. They stood alone. No money. No shelter. No backup plan. At the bus park, they found each other. Crying. Broken for the first time, no drivers. No maids. No cards, just reality. They went to the village. Life there was hard. Cold water. Early mornings. Cooking. Cleaning. Working fields. Blisters on hands. Humiliation. Hunger. They cried. They fought. They wanted to quit, but days passed, weeks passed. Something changed. Natasha learned to cook. Susan learned to sell vegetables. They worked. They earned small money. They laughed at mistakes. They slept tired but peaceful. Matthew watched silently. One night, Natasha said, "Dad, we were blind." Susan added, "You didn't fail us. You saved us." Years later, Matthew rebuilt a smaller business. He offered them positions, or Natasha said no. "Let me earn it." Susan smiled. From the bottom. Matthew smiled for the first time in years, because success without values creates weak people, but struggle with guidance builds unbreakable ones. That's the real inheritance. The village slowly changed Natasha and Susan in ways they never expected. At first, they hated everything. The early mornings. The smell of soil. The silence at night. There were no mirrors big enough, no makeup tables, no fancy lights. Their hands ached from work. Their backs hurt. They cried almost every night. Natasha once threw a plate on the ground and shouted, "I was not born for this life." Susan sat on the floor and cried quietly. "I miss my old room." Matthew didn't shout. He didn't lecture. He simply said, "Sleep. Tomorrow comes early." The next morning, the sun rose before them. Matthew was already outside, chopping wood. Helen watched from a distance, silent and bitter. She still believed this was temporary. A bad dream, but days turned into weeks. Susan learned how to cook simple food. At first, it tasted terrible. Too salty. Burnt. Half raw. But Matthew ate every bite without complaint. That hurt Susan more than any insult. Natasha struggled the most. She had always been admired. Now no one cared who she was. Villagers didn't know her last name. They didn't care about her clothes. They only respected effort. One afternoon, an old woman at the market said, "Girl, if you don't work properly, customers won't come back." Natasha felt insulted. Then she felt ashamed. That night, she practiced. Cutting vegetables. Talking politely. Smiling honestly, not for cameras. Slowly, people started returning. Susan began selling homemade bread with a neighbor. Natasha helped repair old furniture and sell it at the local market. The money was small, but it was theirs. The first time Natasha held money she earned herself, her hand shook. "This is it," she whispered. Susan smiled. "It feels heavy, in a good way." Helen watched her daughters change, and something inside her broke. For years, she believed love meant comfort. Now she saw that comfort had almost destroyed them. One evening, Helen tried to cook dinner alone. She burned the pot. She sat down and cried. Matthew sat beside her. "I didn't bring you here to punish you," he said. "I brought you here to wake you up." Helen nodded slowly. "I was afraid of suffering. I forgot that suffering teaches." Months passed. Natasha stopped checking social media. Susan stopped comparing herself to others. They slept early. They woke early. Their bodies grew stronger. Their minds grew quieter. One day, a man from the city arrived in a dusty car. He asked for Matthew Adams. The villagers gathered. Curious, the man said, "Sir, your name still carries weight. Some of your old partners want to work with you again." Slowly. Carefully. Natasha and Susan froze. Matthew looked at his daughters. "I will rebuild," he said. "But not the old way. Later that night, he called them to sit with him. I can give you jobs, he said. Offices. Salaries. Comfort again. Natasha shook her head. Not yet. Susan added, let us earn it. Matthew smiled. His eyes filled with tears. A year later, Natasha opened a small workshop in the nearby town. Susan started a food business with local women. Helen helped manage accounts. Matthew advised quietly from behind. No luxury cars. No mansion. But peace lived in their home. One evening, Natasha said, if we never lost everything, we would have lost ourselves. Susan nodded. Money didn't leave us. It exposed us. Matthew looked at the sky and whispered, now. I am rich.